Is to call the roll.
Teresa Taylor.
Here.
David Miller.
Here.
Margaret Brown.
Here.
Henry Jones.
He's here somewhere.
Matthew Saha for Fiona Ma.
Here.
Jason Perez.
Here.
And Karen Green Ross for Betty Yee.
Here.
All right, and let the record note that Arena, I can't say your name, I'm sorry. Arena is here, Bill is here, Dana is here, and Ramon are here as well. Let's move on to the approval of the April 16th, 2019 Finance Administration Committee timed agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Brown, seconded by Mr. Miller. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, motion to approve the minutes have passed. And Mr. Cohen, we are moving on to the executive report.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Just in the interest of time, I'll defer any comments and turn it back to you for questions. I'm happy to comment on anything any of the board members have questions on.
Okay, does anybody have questions? We don't have an executive report at this time. All right, we will move on to the action consent items, which is approval of the February 21st Finance Administration Committee meeting minutes.
So moved.
So it's been moved by Mr. Miller, seconded by Mr. Perez. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, we have approved the meeting minutes for February 21st, 2019. Actually, I'm going to move that we move the rest of the action consent items. I apologize.
So moved.
All right, it's been moved. I need a second.
Second, but I have a comment.
Okay.
I'd like 4B to be pulled separately and get a roll call vote on 4B.
Okay, we're going to pull 4B out. So, would like to get, I'm sorry, we're going to have to get a motion to pass C and D on the action consent items. I've got it moved by Mr. Miller, second by Ms. Brown. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, motion passes. We're pulling out 4B to talk about. Ms. Brown?
No, I just want a separate roll call vote on the item.
Okay, so you don't want to talk about it?
Nope.
Okay. So, on 4B, I need to move 4B as an action consent item.
Move approval.
Moved by Ms. Brown, seconded by Mr. Miller. And can we have a roll call vote on that? Okay.
That was on 4B.
4B. All right. All right. Motion passes. Thank you very much. And we're going to move on to, I had no request to pull anything off information consent. So we're going to move on to action agenda items. First, the annual budget proposal, first reading. Mr. Cohen.
I'll have Jennifer Harris, the lead of our budget division, join me. This is the first reading of the organization's budget for the upcoming fiscal year 2019-20. As is practice with CalPERS, we'll do a first reading now and then revisit it in May with any changes that the committee gives us direction on. But let me go ahead and turn it over to Jennifer and Dan from our investment offices here as well.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Jennifer Harris with CalPERS Financial Office. I'll be walking you through the 2019-20 proposed budget, the first reading. I'd like to begin with an update on the current year.
Okay.
CalPERS 2018-19 total authorized budget is $1,698 million. As of December 31st, 2018, $750.4 million, or 44.2%, was expended. Based on analysis of resource utilization, CalPERS forecasts that it will end the 2018-19 fiscal year with $26.8 million in unexpended funds. $15 million of this results from vacancy-related salary savings, and another $5 million results from savings in various operations, equipment, and expense line items, or OE&E, both of which are in the administrative operating cost budget. CalPERS also estimates another $5 million in savings resulting from third-party administration fees. This is based on actual enrollment data, which identifies fewer enrollments in higher fee health plans than previously estimated. Moving on to the 2019-20 fiscal year. The total proposed budget is $1,898 million. This is a $199.4 million increase over the 2018-19 budget. As the slide shows, it's a $205.6 million increase in operating costs, offset by a $6.2 million decrease in enterprise projects. The major highlights of the 2019-20 budget include funding for board-approved salary increases for investment officer classifications and funding for compensation and benefit increases negotiated through the state's collective bargaining process. There are also funds built in for new investment trading platforms and management systems, as well as funds for higher external investment management fees based on asset allocation strategies for Pillars 1 and 2 and asset class market assumptions. There are no new positions proposed in the 2018-19-20 budget, but we'd like to point out that the budget does display the implementation of the new California Employers Pension Pre-Funding Trust Program, which was authorized by Senate Bill 1413, Statutes of 2018. I'll now go through each line item in the budget, beginning with administrative operating costs. Administrative operating costs include personal services expenditures, which are salaries, wages, and benefits for staff, as well as OE&E expenses for each branch within CalPERS. The 2019-20 proposed administrative operating cost budget is $530.3 million. This is a $32.2 million, or 6.5% increase as compared to 2018-19. Personal services expenditures are increasing $32.2 million. And again, this is a result of those board-approved salary increases for investment classifications, which added $6.3 million, as well as the general salary and benefit increases negotiated through the state's collective bargaining processes, which added another $20 million. Year over year, OE&E expenses are going down a net $700,000, which are reductions in various line items in the expense categories. CalPERS doesn't have included in general expenses and OE&E $1 million proposed for a new fiduciary insurance policy. The total budget holds authorized positions at 2,875. This includes 12.5 positions in the position pool. These are positions that will be available for redirection throughout the organization should critical resource needs arise. There is also no funding in the budget for permanent authorized positions in the blanket. As your budget materials indicate, there's some information related to Social Security Administration. Since 1955, CalPERS has been the state's designated Social Security Administrator. In general, CalPERS has responsibility for overseeing contracts between the Social Security Administration and about 2,300 public employers statewide. Expenses related to this responsibility are included in the administrative budget and are funded with residual interest sitting in the Old Age Survivors Insurance Revolving Fund, or the OASI Fund. Beginning in 2019-20, there will be insufficient reserves in this fund to cover administrative expenses. Pursuant to current government code statutory authority, CalPERS will begin assessing an administrative fee to those public employers who offer Social Security benefits to their employees. CalPERS is currently working with the Department of Finance, as required by government code, on the related fee structure. The next line in our budget is investment operating costs. These are expenses specifically related to investment activities. This includes consultants to inform the board of new initiatives, as well as to implement new technology strategies within the investment office. There are also funds for external legal, audit, and appraisal services related to asset valuations, funds for custody and management, as well as data and analytics software. Also included in this line item are funds to implement or improve data platforms and investment strategies. The 2019-20 proposed budget includes $120.4 million for investment operating costs. This is a $27 million or 28.9% increase over 2018-19. Major increases include $3.1 million for consultants. This includes board consultants, as well as technology consultants to help implement some new strategies. There's $3.8 million included for master custodian fees, and $4.9 million included for new data and analytics software and subscriptions related to internalizing more investment functions within the investment office. Finally, there's $14 million proposed for new trading and portfolio management systems that will provide better access to data and increased fund performance. Also included in our budget is a line item for investment external management fees. These fees represent amounts that CalPERS pays to external advisors with whom it contracts to manage specific portfolios. CalPERS estimates these fees based on diversification strategies and market class assumptions. Total fees in 2019-20 are estimated at $899.8 million. This is a $132.8 million increase over 2018-19. With me today is Dan Bienvenu from the Investment Office, and he's going to provide a little bit more information related to the increases in investment operating costs and investment external management fees.
Thanks, Jennifer. Dan Bienvenu, CalPERS team member. So really quickly, the two areas where you see the increases for the investment office are on operating expenses and then management fees. Regarding operating expenses, there are three main drivers of that. The first is technology and data. That has to do with some of the strategies we've internalized. We need to get a better sort of data platform to really know the data around our positions and our holdings, and then technology to access that data. And those are both implementation costs and then actual software costs. The next one is enhanced risk and attribution software. We feel like we've got a pretty good handle on what goes on in the public assets. We're enhancing our capabilities both in private assets and then how it comes together and how it aligns with the liabilities. So that's another category of costs. And then finally, it's just kind of some standard contract step-ups. So step-ups around the board consultants and step-ups around our custodial fees with assumptions based on AUM. And these are kind of part of the existing contract that was already approved. Regarding management fees, and that of course is the lion's share of the cost. The management fees come from the assumptions, and these are proposed budgeting. These are projected management expenses. They come from two things. First of all, assumptions around performance. That's both absolute performance and relative performance. We're assuming that we're going to pay on a higher AUM. That would be base fees, and then we're also assuming that we're going to pay some performance fees. In this space, of course, paying fees is a good thing because that means assets under management is going up, right? Assets are going up, and then also performance is positive. So but this is based on projections, and management fees, candidly, they defy a budgeting process, but we still try to budget and project them for you. The other thing that's driving the management fee increases is around the migration to private assets. Note, importantly, this is for an increase in private equity and real assets projected, with private equity projected as pillars 1 and 2. This does not include anything for pillars 3 and 4. Anything for pillars 3 and 4, as agreed, would come back to the board for approval. But we are still projecting increases in our private assets of pillars 1 and 2 on private equity, and then an increase in real assets. These increases seem large, and I thought it made sense to just give a little bit of context, though, for history, just to share, because I know there's been quite a bit of turnover both on our team as well as on the board. If you look from several years ago, on assets in the $200 billion range, we had expenses in the $1.5 to $2 billion range, so much higher than where we are here. After several years of really focusing on costs, and of course that cost focus continues, and for some members of the board that have been around, they recall a lot of this real focus on cost. We've really driven a lot of these fees down. We've gotten about $500 million, $500 million in annualized run rate savings, plus another about $500 million in one-time savings that have taken us from that sort of $1.8 billion of expenses down to where we are now. This is a focus that remains in place. We will continue to drive that, but I thought it was also finally worth mentioning that if you compare us to our peers, to an organization like the CEM survey, CalPERS costs on the investment side are in the low 30s of basis points relative to our peers, and those are like size and like complexity. They're more in like the mid 40s of basis points. So certainly these are big numbers. This remains something that we're very focused on. But I do think both relative to our history and relative to our, to our peers, we are relatively low cost, and it was worth providing that context. But from there, I'll turn it back to Jennifer, and we'll take questions when appropriate.
Thank you, Dan. Our next category of expenditures are third-party administrator fees. These are amounts that CalPERS pays to external administrators to support the delivery of health and pension programs. These fees paid cover administration, record keeping, and communication with participants. And the programs include our health programs, our long-term care program, the supplemental employment program, our income program, and the two new programs, which are the California Employers Retirement Benefit Trust Program and the California Employers Pension Pre-Funding Trust Program. Year over year, this budget is increasing $13.6 million. These costs are being driven by health plan rate increases that are negotiated through the contracts. On average, there's a 5% annual fee administrative increase built into the 5-year contracts that were negotiated last fall. Oh, I'll also note, as I've indicated before, the display of the new California Employers Pre-Funding Pension Trust Program. This was authorized by Senate Bill 1413, Statutes of 2018. The amounts in the budget are funded by a general fund appropriation that was authorized by Senate Bill 1413. Next up are enterprise project costs. Enterprise projects are technology projects that CalPERS undertakes to improve services, enhance services to members, and to stay current with industry trends and practices. Year over year, CalPERS is requesting a $3.4 million, or I'm sorry, in 2019, CalPERS is requesting $3.4 million for 2 ongoing and 1 new technology project. This includes $2.9 million for the final phase of the Actuarial Valuation System redesign effort, and $236,000 to continue work on the previously approved new Human Resources Management project. Finally, CalPERS requests $174,000 to begin an implementation effort of a new electronic member payment system. This new system will enable members and beneficiaries to make credit and debit card payments online. CalPERS estimates there will be a reduction in workload related to the receipt of about 34,000 paper checks each year, as well as improved collections. This program should be implemented in the spring of 2020. Our final item in the budget are headquarters building costs. The headquarters building budget reflects amounts to operate, maintain, and improve the Lincoln Plaza buildings, as well as costs for regional offices, the off-site emergency operations center, warehouses, and parking space. Year over year, the headquarters building budget is increasing a net $300,000. This reflects some increases in operating costs, which are driven by union contract wage increases for our janitorial, engineering, and security staff, offset by non-operating cost decreases for one-time expenses that were in the 2018-19 budget. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm going to start with Mr. Perez. You're on.
Hi. In regards to the Social Security Administration and the fees that are going to be, the admin fees that are going to be needed, is that something that we can get from the general fund as opposed to hitting the cities with those?
The way the current statute reads is that CalPERS is authorized to assess an administrative fee. There is nothing or no mechanism in statute currently that authorizes a general fund appropriation.
Thank you.
So, and that's your only question, Mr.
Yes,
Perez? Okay. I'm going to follow on that because I thought that was curious myself. So there used to be a fund, and let me go back to the page because I wrote down notes on it. There used to be a fund from Social Security, the old Age and Survivors Insurance Fund, right? That's where we were getting that administrative fee before.
Well, between 1955 and 1987, CalPERS would collect the contributions from employers and deposit them into the Old Age and Survivors Insurance Revolving Fund. Then CalPERS would remit those taxes to the IRS. While the funds sat there, they were earning interest. And per statute, CalPERS was able to use those funds to cover the administrative expenses.
Okay.
But since 1987, there was a change in federal law where CalPERS no longer collects those contributions. They're remitted directly to the IRS from the state controller's office. So there has been residual interest for several years that has covered these expenses, but in 1920, there won't be enough reserves to continue to use that fund source.
So in 2020, you mean?
2019-20.
I got you.
Yes.
Okay, the tax year, or the year, 1920. So since the controller's office does it now, what are we asking for the fees for?
CalPERS currently has a team who is involved in setting up what are called 218 contracts. So when a new employer decides to enter into agreement with the Social Security Administration to offer Social Security benefits to their employees, there's some contracts that have to be set up. There's also regular ongoing reporting and monitoring that goes back to the Social Security Administration. So CalPERS staff are overseeing all of those contracts, monitoring and reporting.
Okay, so we do the background stuff. Controller actually collects the funds from the employers and remits it to the IRS, correct? So that it goes into the trust fund.
Nothing hits the trust fund any longer. It goes directly to the IRS now.
Well, I assume eventually it hits the trust fund, the Social Security Trust Fund.
I'm going to call up Renee Ostrander.
It would hit the social, it does not hit the pension trust fund.
No, I don't mean our trust fund.
Right.
It's
right.
Social Security, federal trust
The
fund.
CalPERS is the administrator of the OSI program for the state of California.
Okay, so we do all of that work, controller remits it. Okay, that's where I was. So if we were to charge that fee, and it comes from all the employers, is that to our local agencies and our state agencies? Is that who's paying that fee? And does that get passed on to the employees?
And it's probably worth a little bit of context here. The amount of fee we're looking at is at most kind of a few $1,000s per government agency that has over 1,000 employees. So we're not talking a big dollar amount, but no, we wouldn't expect anything to be passed on to employees. The interesting angle on this is we would be charging a fee both on existing contract entities with CalPERS as well as all other local government agencies in the state, whether they have an existing relationship with CalPERS or not.
So you have to do it regardless.
That's right.
Oh, interesting.
And so we've basically been living off of the interest from the old way of doing this for the last 30 years. And that money's finally run out. And we have a team of, 5 individuals who sort of comply with the federal rules in administering this.
So basically we have to have a fee for the job that we do. Controller gets a fee for taking it out of the paycheck. That's interesting. Just a kind of a double dip there.
So, Renee Ostrander, CalPERS team member. So let me help kind of jump in. So this has to do with the administration that needs to be done by the coordinator. So it does not have to do with the actual collection of taxes. So there's the collection of taxes that happens at each agency, and those agencies, whether it's state agency or it's a city or a district, whoever has what's called a 218 agreement, which just means that the agency has coordinated to provide Social Security benefits to its members, which they don't have to do. But if they've so chosen that, then they would submit those taxes that are collected along with their portion, the employer's portion, and those are submitted directly from the agency to the IRS. IRS is the collection arm for state Social the Social Security Administration.
So then I'm misinformed. I was trying to figure out how this was working. So I thought the state controller was getting those funds. So you're saying each agency submits it to the IRS already?
Well, if we're talking about state departments, that's a little bit different. But each agency, not state agency, but each entity, so city, district, county, state, each of those agencies send that directly to the IRS.
Okay.
And we used to be involved.
I got that.
Yeah.
Okay. And basically, in this case, the controller's office is acting as the HR sort of function
Agency for the state.
Of California.
Gotcha. Okay, Margaret, go ahead.
Thank you. Can you tell me why our presentation changed from the 23-page one that's in our board books to this 12-page one? Because I could not, I don't know if you know, some of us were lost up here. It's a different presentation than what we got. Mine's
shorter.
Mine's 23 pages.
The PowerPoint, and I think all the information in the PowerPoint is included in the 23-page document. We're sorry for any confusion.
Yeah, it's just I'm trying to figure, what page is this on? Okay, so let me, bear with me while I find my bearings. So, because my notes are on different pages. So on page 5 of your handout of the PowerPoint, you talk about $1 million for fiduciary insurance. That's an increase. It includes the very last bullet at the bottom. OE&E includes $1 million for fiduciary insurance. Does that benefit the board members? Does that protect the board members? And I think that I have a problem with I might have a 1090 problem with this. If this fiduciary insurance protects board members from sued or from a clawback in the event we are sued.
Forrest Grimes, CalPERS team member. Ms. Brown, it would protect both CalPERS and board members through a vehicle called the waiver of recourse, which is kind of a little bit technical, I think, to get into at this point, but that's how the board members and actual staff members would be protected.
Right, so I have a concern that this, if we vote to include this in the budget and CalPERS pays for this, and it actually protects board members individually, that we could have a 1090 conflict, and I'd like to see that get either an attorney general opinion or an opinion on that other than our own counsel, because it also protects you. So I have a concern about that.
I think it would work in a very similar way that you've seen in terms of the personal protection. You end up paying, writing a check for some of the health care programs directly as sort of an exhibition that you're acknowledging the risk and sort of covering your own costs. And in terms of the organization's fiduciary insurance, more broadly, we would expect a similar process by which board members would have to make their own payments.
And that payment should be have some nexus to the actual value we're receiving, that it shouldn't be some nominal fee. It actually should be, there should be a nexus, the fee we pay to the benefit we receive. Is that correct, Mr. Cohen?
In terms of, there does seem to be an industry practice by which the fee is somewhat distant from whether or not a benefit actually is received, but it's certainly something that the insurance industry kind of sets the what they view as an appropriate rate for this waiver of recourse.
So there's no 1090 issue here, is what you're basically saying?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
No.
I'd just like us to take a look at that. If no one else is concerned, I think I have a concern, because the price we pay is so little for the amount of insurance coverage we get. I have a concern that the value we receive.
Go ahead, Mr. Jacobs.
I understand your point. We have taken a look at the 1090 issue, and we've also consulted with fiduciary counsel on it, and we do have an opinion from her that this does not present a 1090 issue.
Great. If we could get that in writing, that'd be phenomenal.
I do not currently have it in writing, but I can ask her to provide it in
conversation.
Great.
Got it. So if we could, Mr. Cohen, if we could have that as committee direction.
A few more items on budget now, something simpler for you. And maybe it's for Mr. Bienvenu. I've been working on that name. So it's page 15 on my slide. Let me see what page it is on your slide. The increase in the cost for, maybe it's not detailed in here. It's on page 15 of my detailed slide where we talk about the increase in external management fees, and you sort of explained it. The AUM is going up and the value is going up, so the increase is a good thing. Except when I look at the external management performance fees on real estate, it's going up 74%. Now, if it's 74%, it's on a very small amount of money, that's fine, but it's 74% on a large amount of money. So can you kind of explain to me why it's going up that dramatically?
So it has to do with assumptions around the previous valuations and then the projected valuations. Again, we make projections around what we think the valuations will be and then what the resultant management fees, performance fees will be based on that. And that set of projections leads us to that number. If we were going to go deeper, I would have to dig much deeper into the numbers.
So I'll just, a couple more just technical questions. So performance fees, this is the 2% or performance fees, the carry?
The carry. The
carry, great. And so according to this, either we don't pay carry until the asset is sold or transferred, is that correct?
Let me see if I can get Matt Flynn, who knows
on real assets,
knows these a little deeper than me to describe exactly
I'm just
when
wondering
we pay
because I think if you pay carry, it's because the asset was sold, and so are we selling a lot of assets, or are we just increasing the number in case we sell the asset? Or help me understand.
Good question. Matt Flynn, CalPERS team member. Real assets has I'll call it lumpy performance payout process. It's paid out over typically a 5 or an 8-year cycle. And valuations across the real assets portfolio have been going up over that period of time. And the real assets team is projecting, based on those inflated valuations, that we would be paying our strategic partners a performance fee. Keep in mind, strategic partners do get paid on unrealized gains, but that's the nature of our long-term relationship with those entities.
I did not realize we paid carry on unrealized gains. I thought we only paid it on assets that were sold. So
no, this is the reason for that sort of 5 to 8 year crystallization cycle, is that we don't want to give an incentive to a manager to dispose of an asset
because he wants
so
to
that
get
they
paid.
can collect their carry. We would rather hold on to the good assets, and that's why we crystallized over an extended period of time. But there is an alignment of interest component here, and that's the rationale for that.
And so it might be helpful for those of us who are new on this committee to maybe get multiple years of changes, like to see the increase, because we're seeing increase, right? This last fiscal year to this fiscal year. So I'd like to know if it's gone up 75% a year for the last 5 years, or maybe we've had some dips as well, right? Because we think it's going to go down and up. I would assume that's...
It's a volatile process, and you're
Excellent.
absolutely, your intuition is exactly correct. Based on valuations, based on which particular strategic manager is in a payout cycle and who's not, the valuations or the payouts do change. As far as the data, we absolutely have that data, and if so directed, we could provide it.
It just might be helpful to see it in a little bar graph. I don't know if anybody else wants to see it, but I'd like trends, right? Where are we going? And if we're making more money, I'm perfectly happy with that. 74% was a big jump. Is that a big jump for you? Is that an anomaly for real assets?
Last year was an anomaly to be low. So what you're seeing is the peak to trough change from an extremely low year where we actually had some clawback type of activity to a projected high period. And you're just seeing that peak to trough change being excessive, which it is. But if you look at it over time, I think as to your point, you'll see that it is a much tighter bandwidth.
That would be awesome. And then one more question on global equity. On the base fees, we're going up 36%. So Dan, this is going to be you. And so why is it going, and is that a normal increase, or is that standard, or why is it going up by 36%?
Yeah, what you'll see there is about a $30-some million increase on the base fees, and then an offsetting decrease on the performance fees. What we've done over the past several years is migrate to a place where we put more of it in base and less in performance. We've done that because we found that we would actually get similar investment performance and higher fees with the base performance calculation, as opposed to just going with the base, and then really the incentive is that we'll terminate you if we don't like the way the performance is going.
Okay, thank you very much.
So that's been an intentional migration over the past several years.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jones.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Apologize, I came in a little late, so I don't know if you addressed this question earlier, but I'm looking at on the iPad, because I don't see it on the handout, and I'm on page 10 of 23. And several years ago, we adopted a policy on putting a vacancy credit in the budget. It was a policy decision by the Finance Committee, and I see that it's been removed, so I don't remember that policy change coming back to the board.
I think both Jennifer and I have are new on the organization's budget, and so we sort of took a fresh look at some of the practices. And in terms of budgeting these things, you'll notice one of the things you might have also missed is there's no longer any permanent positions in the temporary help blanket. So that's been something that was going on a long time, and we sort of put an emphasis on getting rid of. We also sort of felt like the forced vacancy savings rate was not a sort of an accurate way of projecting expenses within the organization's individual divisions. So we made some methodological changes in terms of budgeting. It's sort of budgeting individual employees at the mid-step of their classification, which is more aligned with state budgeting practice. But if it's something that the committee wants to direct us to go back and sort of have this vacancy rate, it's certainly something we could do before May. We just as a group didn't see it having much value, and it was causing confusion within the organization, giving the sense that the organization didn't want divisions to actually fill their vacancies. So right now, what we've tried to move to is, here's all of your funding for your staff. Go fill your vacancies. That's what you're budgeted for, and don't arbitrarily hold positions vacant on the expectation that you have to meet a certain criteria. But we can certainly sort of respond to the committee's direction.
Right,
here.
and I appreciate the comment. That's why when we discussed it, the credit for the vacancy was put at the fund level rather than individual offices, because there's no way to know where vacancies are going to occur throughout the organization, but we know they're going to occur. And matter of fact, your another page, I don't remember what page it is, but your unexpended amount is $26 million. Right. So where is that money coming from? Probably from vacant positions. So therefore, we need to continue, I believe, the policy of putting that credit in, because if you don't put the credit in, that money is free to be invested somewhere. So if I would suggest, because it was a policy decision, I think it should be returned to the committee if the committee wants to change it.
Sure, and I'll...
Yeah, okay, yeah. And so we know it's going to be salary saving, we just don't know where.
Right.
That's why when we discussed this, when it was implemented, we put the savings at the bottom of the budget, so that's less money needed somewhere in the budget, we just don't know where until the end of the year.
Sure, understood. And you're right, the current year savings is largely from personnel savings in an organization that's so heavy in its staffing. Most of the savings are going to come from there. But in terms of coming back in May, we can... The problem is, in terms of kind of the way we've built the budget now, is we've sort of forecast all personnel expenses at the middle level of an individual staff range. So we could try to come up with a vacancy rate, but we're a little concerned that it's not going to be internally consistent as a document. But we can spend some time, if that's the committee's direction, that you would like to see something.
So yeah, I think...
And please be aware that
Well, hold on, I got more commentary on that too,
Yeah.
Henry, sorry.
Huh?
I have more commentary on that from Margaret, so
Well,
go
I
ahead.
still got the mic.
No, I'm just saying we're not making a decision yet.
That's fine. And if you have a better way to do it, I don't have a problem with that. It's just that it was a policy decision, and it was, I saw the numbers change, and I said, well, I don't remember that coming back to the committee.
Gotcha. No, you're correct. We didn't bring a policy change outside of the budget document. But
Okay, and I think we'll probably go ahead with that, but I've got two more folks that want to talk. Go ahead, Margaret.
Okay, so thank you for bringing that up, Henry, because last year when I looked at the budget, I thought, what the heck is this vacancy savings? I've never seen anything like this in a budget document, and it was odd. So I did not know it was a policy decision, but again, vacancies just fall to the bottom line at the end of the fiscal year, and I mean, what you're doing, this budget is correct in terms of how you're supposed to budget those. So yes, money falls to the bottom line, and that's sort of how it works. But so I would not be in favor of it, but I may be overruled here.
So I will say the state of California actually does do salary savings and counts that on our budget for each agency. But Mr. Perez.
I think this is an accurate representation, what you presented, and it should just be on the bottom line. It is, as a guy that has to worry about salary and the budget that I have to work with, it is something that comes up and you do think about, if I don't fill it, maybe have a little money over here. And I'm not saying the CalPERS team does that, but there's always potential. So I like the way that you have it. And if it's an issue just because of a process, maybe we can, I don't know how it works, if we just undo that section of policy, or?
We can, but I would need a motion. Go ahead, Mr. Jones.
No, I think that there was a policy that had some debate on it, and I think if we're going to change the policy, we should
Have a debate.
Have debate on it.
Yeah.
I don't think we should just change it.
So why don't we, Mr. Cohen, why don't we have you bring this back with the policy we originally passed, and then for the next Finance Administration meeting, and we can talk about it at that point.
I certainly, we can think more about it and sort of come with a formal recommendation whether we think the old policy makes more sense than the way we presented it. I would say we do have the benefit here at CalPERS of doing the mid-year budget updates that we always do, so we can always, it's not a matter of us not being able to provide a number that sort of shows you what vacancies have generated in terms of savings. Certainly, I would support the notion of constantly providing this board the information in terms of how much vacancies we have at a particular point in time and how much that savings generates. But why don't we do that and come back in May with a little bit more discussion?
Since we have two dissenting opinions on whether it should be in the budget or not. I do know the state, I don't know how current that practice is, but I do know the state of California makes that a normal practice. Go ahead, Ms. Brown.
Thank you. I had two other questions, and I can't find it on this PowerPoint. But can you tell me how much we spend in legal fees on an annual basis, and how many staff we have, and then also how much we spend on the communication stakeholder group, and how many number of staff we have? If you don't want to tell me how many, you can just tell me positions, because I assume some of them are open.
Yeah, I think if you are in the full document, page 12, we'll have the positions by the branch. But
It's positions, but not the cost, right? Or just have both?
Correct. All this chart has is the positions.
And if you look at the appendix on page 22, you'll find the budget by branch.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. I'm showing no further requests to speak by the board. So this is an action item. I'll need a motion. All right, it's been moved by Mr. Miller, second by Mr. Jones. All those in favor of passing the first reading of the 2019 annual budget proposal, in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay, I have one abstention with Ms. Brown. It has passed, and we are moving on to 6B, which is annual review of board member employer reimbursement.
Right. Members, this item reflects, for those of you who are affected by the reimbursement rates, sort of the percentages that you submitted as requested for the board to approve. So unless people want to get into more detail, I'll stop there.
Okay, I'm not showing any requests to speak, so all those, I need a motion for the annual review.
Move approval.
Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Brown, second by Mr. Miller. All those in favor of passing this?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right. 6B has passed. And 6C, state valuation,
Right.
employer-employee
bring
contribution.
up the actuary team
And
here.
Scott, haven't seen you in forever.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Scott Tarando, Chief Actuary for CalPERS. Item 6C is a action item and sets the state valuation and state employee rates for the fiscal year 19-20. The contribution rates for the upcoming year are a little bit higher than what was last year, but the change is generally in what we consider in line with our expectations. If we look at what we projected last year and compare them to what we've calculated this year, they're in alignment. We're looking at approximately about a $7 billion contribution overall for the state plans, with the funded status increasing slightly about 2% to 69.5%. Joining me today is Ms. Nina Ramsey, she will step through the presentation and provide a little bit more detail about the rates, the funded status, and where the contributions are.
Thank you, Scott. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Nina Ramsey, CalPERS team member. We are here to present to you the results of the latest state valuation, valued as of June 30th, 2018. The state plan consists of the 5-member subgroups listed on the slide above, and it will be setting the rates for the 2019-20 fiscal year. There have been a few significant events that have occurred since our last valuation. First, the PERF earned a 8.6% investment return for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2018. Second, we've had some assumption changes. They include the board-adopted reduction to the discount rate to 7%, and the board-adopted reduction to the inflation rate to 2.5%. At this point, all of the board-adopted assumption changes are included in the state valuation. Last year, the state made an additional contribution of $6 billion towards their unfunded liability. The payment was included in last year's valuation and effectively reduced their 2018-19 required contributions. This payment is now also included in the funded status as of June 30th, 2018, and it improved the funded status by approximately 3%. Lastly, we are now using a new actuarial valuation system. The new system has refined and improved our calculation methodology, and the impact of the change is treated the same as an assumption change would be for valuation purposes. Here we have the prior and current year results. We have a market value of assets as of June 30th, 2018 of $136 billion. This includes the $6 billion payment that was made during the 17-18 fiscal year and the 8.6% investment return. We have an accrued liability of nearly $196 billion, leaving us with an unfunded accrued liability of approximately $60 billion. The expected annual contribution rate for the 19-20 fiscal year is approximately $7 billion, which is $675 million greater than last year. The contributions are increasing primarily due to the following factors. First, the progression of the amortization bases, which include a ramp up of costs for over 5 years. We've reduced the discount rate from 7.25% to 7%, and the fact that the state's payroll grew by 4.6% as compared to last year, which is greater than our 2.875 assumed payroll growth. These increases were offset by the investment return, which was greater than our assumed rate of return, and due to new members entering into lower benefit formulas due to PEPRA. We estimate that the state will see $43 million in savings in the 19-20 fiscal year due to the increase in PEPRA members. This slide shows the prior and current results by member category. We have each of the 5 plans with their 18-19 contribution requirement and their 19-20 contribution requirement. You can see that all of the contributions are increasing, but that is as expected, as described during the previous slide. On a positive note, the 19-20 contribution rates are close to the projected rates that were provided in last year's annual valuation. Here we have the total 2019-20 contributions by plan. We have the actuarially required contributions in the left column and the additional statutory contribution that is required of the state. They sum together to get the total contribution. This information is also on page 6 of the agenda item. Government Code Section 20683.2 requires that the state use the savings realized from increased member contributions due to PEPRA as additional payments towards their unfunded liability. This is not something that we are asking the board to approve. This is more for informational purposes. The additional contribution is maintained by the state during their annual budget process. This shows the brief history of the state's funded status. The funded status is a measure of the state's overall plan health. Each of the plans within the state has its own funded status, but as of June 30th, 2018, the overall funded status for the state plans is 69.5%, which is 2.1% greater than last year. Moving on to member contributions, there are some recommended changes to member contributions for the 1920 fiscal year. In general, most state plans are exempt from the PEPRA requirement that they pay half of the normal cost. However, there are 3 groups that are not exempt. They include the legislature, the California State University, and the judicial branch. This year, the normal cost has increased by more than 1%, which triggers a change for the POF members in these groups. Their member contribution rate will change from 11% to 12% effective July 1st, 2019. The miscellaneous groups in the groups listed above have no change for this year. Bargaining units 9, 10, and 16 have also bargained that their members will pay 50% of the normal cost. This year, the normal cost has increased by more than 1% for certain groups. The following groups will have their member contributions changed as of July 1st, 2019. The miscellaneous members in bargaining units 9 and 10 will increase from 8 to 8.5%, and the safety members in bargaining units 9, 10, and 16 will increase from 11 to 11.5%. Lastly, we have the projected future employer rates. You can see that the rates are going up for the next 5 years and then decreasing in the final year. This is due mostly to the progression of the amortization basis where the costs are ramped in over 5 years, which is why the last one is lower. We will be putting out our full valuation report towards the end of this summer. This will include our methods, assumptions, and participant data information. It will also include a revised projection, which will include the June 30, 2019 final rate of return. That concludes my presentation, and with that, I would be happy to take any questions.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to start with Ms. Brown.
Thank you. Can we go back to page 5 of the presentation? You said that the new employer contribution rates are close to what we told them. So that's a real accurate number for the actuarial department. So maybe plus or minus 1%, plus or minus 1/10 of 1%?
Yes, so we have the miscellaneous and industrial groups are lower than our projection last year. They're all within 1% of the projection.
Much better number than close to, thank you. Go ahead.
If you want, we can run through the numbers if you want it all.
You can just give me your little cheat sheet when you're done. That would be great.
Okay.
I just worry when I hear close to. You know.
Well, on the
go ahead, show off.
For not quite as close as Ben, but pretty close. For the CHP and the state police officers, the increases were a little bit higher than we anticipated. On the other ones, they were a little bit lower. So fairly close on both ends.
Okay. So for some on the board, we'd probably like a number.
The numbers?
A number then close to
1%.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why don't I just run through them all?
Sure. Thank you.
For state miscellaneous, we projected 31.2.
It's 30.9. Okay, great.
State industrial, it was projected to be 21.0.
Okay.
Good.
State safety was projected to be 21.5.
Well, there we are.
Yep.
Yeah.
You are as close as Ben.
Yeah, and that for state police officers, I was 46.6. So rates are about 0.5% higher.
Mm-hmm.
And for CHP, it was 57. So approximately 0.8% higher.
Well, that's very close. You are correct. Close to was correct. So let's do something fun on page 3. The last bullet, you talk about a change in actuarial valuation system. So you guys got new calculators, or do you want to tell us a little bit about what that might be?
Yes, so it is something of a new calculator for us. We are now able to store a lot more data that will improve our calculations so that we have a more precise calculation of what future benefits will be. For example, we are now able to store a member's max historical compensation, which is what their benefit will be based off of in the future. So that's how we are making our future benefit calculations more precise. We also have switched to monthly calculations from annual calculations, which allows us to better predict when COLA increases are and how those will impact a member's future benefits.
So for all 1.9 million members?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. That's very helpful.
All right, Mr. Perez.
This probably is more for Marcy. Where is Governor Newsom on giving us that extra $3 billion bucks?
So it was presented in his budget proposal, and it now needs to work its way through the legislative budget cycles. So we'll know in a few months.
And just a quick comment, these results don't reflect
any of that.
Right. There was discussions about what the amount would be, timing, and there were too many variables for us to accurately incorporate those into these numbers.
Scott, I didn't, I should have taken notes when you were talking. Can I have that, that cheat sheet too, that you're gonna?
Yeah.
So can we provide the board with the cheat sheet? That would be awesome.
I will send that as an attachment to the full board.
Okay. And I'm wondering, does the board want to see the when we get this presented next year, after all the readings are done, does the board want to see in the future the projected amounts and how close we were, so that's one of the columns?
Sure. We can just add that to the agenda item, so it's either
always
it's an attachment or it's in there. So
okay, that would be awesome.
You can have that information.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, any other questions? It doesn't look like it. So that's an action item.
Move approval.
It's been moved by Ms. Brown, second by Ms. Green Ross. So all those in, Henry.
No, go ahead and finish.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, so the motion passes on state valuation employer contribution. Mr. Jones.
Chair, I would just ask that you ask for the record to show that I'm present here, because when the roll was called, I was not present.
I said you were here.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
But that's okay, yes.
Okay.
Let the record reflect Mr. Jones is here. I said he's here. So, all right, so we're moving on to 6D, schools valuation employer-employee contribution. And Mr. Toronto again?
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair. Item 6D is also an action item, and this establishes the contribution rates for the schools pool for fiscal year 1920. I'm joined today by Kurt Snyder, who will step through the valuation results and the contribution rates. And before we get started, I'll just point out really quick that our expected or projected rate was 20.7, and the actual rate is 20.7. So
there you go,
right
Ben again, man.
So at this point, I'll let Kurt go ahead and step through the results.
Thank you, Scott. Kurt Schneider, Actuarial Office. So we'll run through this one. It'll look a little familiar because we just did one. So this is the actuarial evaluation as of June 30, 2018, which determines the employer and employee contributions for the upcoming fiscal year 19/20. All school employers, remember, are in the same pool. It's all acts as one big plan with one single employer rate for the entire pool. The significant events, I'll be careful, this isn't quite the same as the state. We did have the same investment return, 8.6%. In the 17-18 fiscal year, which will now be reflected. The assumption changes, though, are a little bit different. So for the schools pool, for the 18 valuation, we're reflecting the demographic assumptions from the December 2017 experience study, and we're moving the discount rate to 7.25%. So we're 1 year behind the state valuation on the assumption changes. The change to the amortization policy that happened in 2018 was set to begin implementation with the 2019 valuation, so nothing about that policy actually impacts this valuation or these contribution rates. The same updates to the actuarial valuation system, I'd just like to add. So there is a extra unfunded liability for most of these plans because of that, and it looks like an extra cost, but remember, the benefits haven't changed. So when we reflect the extra cost, it really means a long-term savings for the plan by reflecting them now rather than waiting until they're paid. Here we have last year's and this year's numbers side by side. The market value of assets increased by about $4 billion. The accrued liability increased by about $8 billion, which means the unfunded liability went up. The funded status is now 70.4%, and that gives us an employer contribution rate, as Scott said, 20.733% compared to what was projected of 20.7. So going from 18.062 to 20.733, there's a lot of different reasons, and in the agenda item, there's a whole page that kind of breaks it out into all the different things that happened. The main takeaway is that when we have 5-year ramps to smooth the impact of various changes, it means in any given valuation, you're being impacted by everything that happened in the last 5 years. The PEPR member contribution rate is staying at 7%, same as last year. Here's the contribution rate broken out by normal cost and unfunded liability payment. And you can see how those, again, those are broken out in much more detail in the agenda item. And as well, at the bottom, we have the dollar amounts. The entire employer contribution for the fiscal year is projected to be just under $3 billion. Here's the funded status history over the last 5 years. As Ms. Brown pointed out, it's better to look at a period of time rather than a single number. And there you have it. PEPR contribution, so let's talk about that for a minute. So the active members right now in the schools pool, their payroll is $4.15 billion. That's 31% of the active payroll. That means, 31% of the cost for actives is based on the PEPR benefit rather than the classic benefit. So that's a savings right now in this current rate of about 0.8% of payroll, the fact that these PEPR members are there rather than all classic. And again, the PEPR member contribution rate is staying at 7% because we have not crossed that threshold, which would be a 1% change in the total contribution rate. And here we have the projected contribution rates going forward for the next 5 years. Again, in year 5, they peak at 26.6% of payroll, and then a slight drop as that last gain gets ramped up, 26.5% of payroll. And again, the entire valuation report will be available in the summer with a lot more detail. But right now, the important thing is the contribution rate of 20.733%. And with that, I'll take your questions.
Move approval.
Second. Moved by Ms. Brown, seconded by Mr. Miller. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes for the school's valuation employer-employee contribution. And we're moving on to 7A, Semiannual Health Plan Financial Report. And that is, who's coming up here? Emily Zong? Hi. Looks like. Didn't we move this out? Nobody's here but the members. When did we move this out? Your mic's not on.
Sorry, wrong
There you go.
Good afternoon. This is Agenda Item 7A, Semiannual Health Plan Financial Report. It is an informational item. This report summarizes, as of December 31st, 2018, the financial result for the partially self-funded or flex-funded HMO plan and for our self-funded PPO plan. I'll give you highlights of the report. Let's start with the PPO plan. As you may recall, a new reserve policy was approved by the Pension and Health Benefit Committee in September 2018. The financial figure in this report reflect the updates of a new policy. Attachment 1 has the financial result for the PPO plan. As of the end of 2018, the total assets for PPO plan was $660 million. The actuarial reserve based on the new reserve level was $507 million. Medical claim costs for the basic plan increased less than 2% over 2017. On the Medicare side, medical claim costs increased around 4%. Pharmacy costs for the PPO plan are trending around 8%, and the PPO enrollment increased about 2.5% over 2017. Let's move on to the Flexband HMO plan. Attachment 2 shows the financial result for the Flexband HMO plan. Total assets for HMO are currently at $233 million, with an incurred but not reported claim reserve of $149 million. That leaves a balance of $84 million for all Flexband HMO plan as of the end of last year. Still to be accounted for are the final risk adjustment transfer for Phase 4 2018, and those will be reflected in the next semi-annual report in the November board meeting. In total, the medical and pharmacy claim costs are trending in the low to mid-single digits for HMO. However, there are a lot of variation between the individual plans. This is mainly caused by the amount of migration in the HMO plan year over year. And the HMO enrollment decreased slightly, less than 1% over 2017. And the team will continue to monitor the plan cost experience and financial result for the first half of 2019, and we will report back to you next time. And that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I forgot that was off. I'm not seeing any questions from the committee, so this is an action item, I believe? Information item. So we're going to move on to summary of committee direction at this point.
Chair, I have 4 items, 3 from the budget discussion. First, a written council opinion on the 1090 fiduciary insurance issue. Second, historical data on the real assets performance fees. And then third, agendizing the vacancy rate conversation for a deeper conversation in May. And then in the state valuation, we'll send out the cheat sheet of projected versus actual, and then going forward in agenda items, we'll include that as standard practice.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So I don't have any public comment. Does anybody want to make public comments? All right, then this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. Oh.